hopefully, and off we go.
Good morning, everyone. If you are watching this, it means that unfortunately things have not really gone to plan, and I've tested positive for COVID. I am feeling okay. I don't have any symptoms or anything, but one of the boys that I work with actually tested positive in the week. And so we were all encouraged to get tested. So this is where we're at. But thankfully, modern technology means that I am still able to chat to you, and I'm still able to share some of the stuff that I've prepared for being with you this morning. I'm really sad that I can't be with you this morning. I have been involved in some of the conversations regarding the growing young stuff from fairly on in the beginning of the conversations, and have, even with the experience that I have in the background that I have in youth work and community youth work, I found it really challenging, and I found it that I've had a lot of my preconceptions and a lot of assumptions and even a lot of the way that I've been doing things up until this point have been questions. And it's not about us all doing the wrong things, but it's about looking at culture and looking at society today and looking what is attracting young people and what is bringing young people into the church, but more importantly, what is helping them to stay put, what is helping them to connect with Jesus, and what is helping them to develop and progress in their relationship with God. And therefore, how do we give them the opportunity to serve in the church, and how do we give them the opportunity to be part of leadership and be part of the bigger conversations and be part of the future? At this point, it's maybe helpful for me to just fill you in a little bit about kind of my experience and my background, and I guess a little bit what sort of platform I'm speaking from and what I'm sharing from. I wasn't brought up in a Christian home. I wasn't brought up with a faith background at all, really. Church wasn't something that really came up every day, other than maybe in primary school when we did school assemblies and when we used to go to Remembrance Day services. But I don't ever recall, as part of my childhood, being very much introduced into churches or that kind of stuff. So church was very new to me. It had some interesting thoughts as far as what church was for me. It didn't have particularly positive thoughts for me. I just thought it was a bit boring. I thought it was a bit irrelevant, and I didn't really see what church could do for me. So that was where I stood with the whole church thing. So by the time we moved to Inverness when I was 10, I wasn't particularly social. I'd never joined much in with things like youth clubs or social settings. Was a bit of a homebody, was a bit of a loner, and was very quiet and introverted, which is completely, if anybody knows me, is completely the opposite of what I am now. And that was because, for me, church changed my life. Jesus changed my life, and being introduced to him changed my life. But it wasn't, it was an interesting way of being introduced to faith. I was 15 when I made a commitment. I met a gorgeous guy. He came to our school. He was a missionary for a church organisation, and he had committed to being in our school for a couple of weeks with a band that he was part of, and they were sharing their story, they were sharing their gifts, they were doing gigs, they were doing stuff in the city centre, and me and my friends were really keen to get involved in everything that they were involved in. So we had 2 weeks where we spent a lot of time with these guys with some really great conversations, and a lot of conversations were revolving around faith, and they were revolving around church and God and Jesus and relationships with God and Jesus, which I couldn't really at the time get my head around. But eventually, after these kind of couple of weeks of getting to know them and getting to know their story, I had a real sense that I wanted some of that. I wanted to be part of what they were part of. And so I made a commitment, and I said that prayer, and I asked God for forgiveness, and I asked him to come into my life. what was really, really encouraging to me is that I'm pretty sure that all of these people from the church and the youth leaders at the time and the young people at the time, I'm pretty sure they knew all this about me, but they still loved me. They still accepted me. They still were willing to get to know me. And they were still willing to look at what some of my gifts were and what some of my skills were, and look past the rogueness and the I guess a little bit of a menace that I was, and see that actually I was a good person, and that I deserved to be loved and I deserved to be reached out to. So there I was, 15 years old, loud, proud, a little bit obnoxious maybe, a little bit presumptive, and a little bit bolshy, and overly confident probably. And I had become part of this church, and it was a real part of my life, and I'd gotten to know the young people in the church, and they were fab, and there's still some of my very best friends to this day. But it was an interesting change of life for me, and change of lifestyle, and I automatically had this extra family that I was part of. And they were giving me all sorts of cool opportunities, and they were letting me try things out, and they were letting me, in a way, fail in a safe place to fail. That, for me, I think is one of the amazing things about growing young, is that has been really identified as something that is a key priority if we're going to keep encouraging young people to stick with their faith and to stick with relationship with God, is that they need to be in a safe place where they won't always get it right, but they're still loved, and they're still loved unconditionally. So from that point, I was involved in lots of extra things with the youth work that was currently going on at King's. I started volunteering my time as a young leader, and then I was part of their leadership team for their youth work. And then I started getting involved in music, and I realised I really loved playing drums. I had a friend who was the drummer at the church at the time, and spent a lot of time with him, and he taught me stuff, and it was just amazing. It was great fun. And I got to be really loud, and that was okay. But I'm so excited to be part of this Growing Young journey, because it recognises that these are all things that are really important to bring our young people into church, and to keep them, and to grow our church with young people, and to invest in young people. And I'm really for that. When I was 20 years old, having gone through some of these young leader experiences and the things that I've been doing, I became a bit restless, and I became ready to do something different. I had really been enjoying being part of this church, and I love my church family. I felt very, very much part of the family, and I had been given incredible opportunities by this point. But I loved worship, and I loved music, and I loved being able to explore who Jesus was in worship. And my best and favourite place for doing that was behind the drum kit. My friend that had been teaching me drums had gone away to this music college that it sounded amazing. I got to play drums every day, all day. I got to be with other people that were passionate about worship, that were passionate about music, and I got to do it every day. It didn't mean moving away to somewhere new, and that excited me, because I was ready for an adventure, and I was ready for God to do something in me somewhere else. And so I pushed that door, and I was accepted to go to Nexus. When I finished up my Nexus year, I was ready still to do something different. I wasn't ready to come home, and I got an opportunity to go and do some music ministry in Aberdeen. I did that for 2 years. And as part of that, I did some discipleship training with an organisation called DNA, and that really focused on sort of my leadership skills, and developing me for leadership in the future, which to a certain extent I didn't really see myself as a leader in that way, but it was just part of what we were doing while we were there that year. So again, it was an incredible experience, and I got to know some incredible people, and I got to experience and understand God and church and faith in a way that I hadn't learned before. So, and then God told me to come home, and I really didn't want to. However, I did listen and I did obey. And I had started some conversations with the leadership at King's and talking to them a little bit about, where I was at and how I was doing and what felt like God was saying to me. And they very much confirmed what I felt like God was saying to me at that point. And so just a few months later, I moved home. As much as I didn't want to, I left my family in Aberdeen, my friends in Aberdeen, and I moved back here. And that was when it was really interesting shift in dynamics for me as a young person that had grown up in the church without a Christian background, and then all of a sudden I was part of the leadership of a church, and I was employed by the church, and I was in that post for nearly 12 years. And they were an amazing 12 years. I had a fantastic time. Again, lots of great experiences. But the most important part for me is that I got to raise 3 generations of young people through high school. Some of them still involved in church. Some of them still very much involved in ministry now. And some of them whom I know and I trust in God that they've had those seeds planted, and that the stuff and the work that we did with them maybe isn't going to come to fruit right now, but at some point, God, in God's timing, He will welcome them. I've recently started working with young people in a different setting. I work for the local council now, and I work as a therapeutic young person's worker. And I work with young people in long-term residential care that have been brought up in care for a long time, and I work with them, mainly the young people that are suffering with a great deal of trauma, a great deal of backgrounds that no young person should ever have had to grow up with. And so that's been really interesting and really challenging and very emotional, actually, to think that some of these young people have gone through so much and yet they still have so much love to give. I very much believe that God has me here for a reason, in this position, for this time. And I am loving the opportunity to be light in the darkness. And that's what I feel right now, is that very much He has me in a position of light where there is a whole lot of darkness. I'm sure that you all by now are very, very aware of the 6 core commitments that probably all of the other speakers will have mentioned, but they really do create the foundation of what Growing Young is looking to try and achieve. And obviously it represents the research that has been done with the young people and them saying, these are the things that are important to us. These are the things that mean that we want to stay within the church. These are the things that keep us coming back, because we know that you are empathizing with us. We know that you're making us a priority. We know that you're exempling key chain leadership because you're giving us opportunities. We know that you are the best neighbour and that we are seeing you do incredible stuff in the local community, and we really want to be a part of that, and we really want to make a difference. So the topic that I have been asked to speak on today is the subject of being the best neighbour, which is one of the 6 core commitments from Growing Young. Young people had said that it's important to them that they see a church living out that principle, that being the best neighbour, that they wanted to be part of that, and they wanted to be part of being the best neighbour in their communities. That subject is so exciting to me because it has so much potential for young people to really get stuck into, and it has so much potential for young people to join in with and to have some fun with. I love doing this kind of stuff. It's fun. It's so nice to think, oh, that person needs this, I'm going to make sure that happens. Or that person needs a friendly ear. I'm going to make sure that happens. That person needs this thing, and I've got that, so I can do that. I can see that need and I can meet that need. So the first question that I feel like needs just a very quick clarification, and I'm sure that you guys have all got this well and truly, but it's still worthwhile mentioning, is that the question of, well, who's our neighbour? Well, Jesus is quite clear with that. It's not always easy to do that. is sometimes a real great challenge. The person along the road who is constantly peeking through their blinds to try and see what trouble they can get you into, or the guy on the other side of you that has got his music up, blaring in the middle of the night so that you can't get to sleep, or the group of young people that are sitting out on the roads and making a racket while you're trying to enjoy your day off. These are the kind of things that can irk us. These are the kind of things that can cause us to feel a real dislike for some people sometimes, and it is easy to it's easier to dislike people, I think. But sometimes it's a challenge for us to choose to love someone and to choose to like them. Those are our neighbours. Those are the people that Jesus challenges us to still love regardless. So that is our challenge. Who is our neighbour? Well, it's everybody. It's our community. It's the people that we live in the street with. It's the people that we work with. It's the people that we hang out with. It's everybody. That in itself is a challenge when it comes to answering questions. Well, how do we teach our young people to live out that principle as well? How do we teach our young people to love people regardless? Because it's a pretty easy reaction to just to dislike people sometimes. But I think that we, as slightly more experienced Christians, people that have got a little bit more have had a little bit more time to work on these things, and we get the opportunity and the privilege to demonstrate some of this stuff, even though it challenges a little bit and it doesn't come very naturally to some of us. So that would be my first kind of question: is that a challenge for you? Think about some of the people that you maybe struggle with relationship wise, and if you saw a need that they need met, would you have a challenge trying to meet that need based on the current state of your relationship with them? So Jesus says, love the Lord with all of your heart and with all of your soul and with all of your mind. This is the first and the greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbour as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commitments. So Jesus is saying that this is important. This is something important to him. This whole bit is about, well, actually, this is something you need to live out. This is something that you need to demonstrate. And these are important points to think about. The parable of the Good Samaritan. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. Teacher, he asked, what must I do to inherit eternal life? What is written in the law? Jesus replied. How do you read it? He answered, love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and love your neighbour as yourself. You have answered correctly, Jesus replied. Do this and you will live. But the teacher of the law wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, who is my neighbour? In reply, Jesus said, a Jewish man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes when he was attacked. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he passed, he saw the man. He passed by on the other side. So too did a Levite. When he came to the place and he saw the injured man, he also passed by on the other side too. But a Samaritan, as he travelled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged all his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbour to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? Jesus said. The expert in the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. Jesus told the expert, go and do likewise. So there's your answer to the why we should love our neighbour. And that's because Jesus told us to. He told us to go and do likewise. Go and do as the Samaritan did. In this parable, Jesus is telling us that it doesn't matter where you're from. It doesn't matter whether you're a Jew, whether you're a Levite, whether you are a Samaritan. We are called to love one another, and we're called to love our neighbour. In this situation, the Samaritan would have been shunned. He would have been disreputed and rejected by his community. He would have been shamed. He took a big risk by being kind to this man, by giving him the care that he needed. And it also had a financial cost to it. So in this, we read that he has taken 2 denarii and he's given it to the innkeeper. He said, please take this to pay for anything that it costs you to look after him. But if you do incur any more costs, I will reimburse you for it. Now, the Samaritan man didn't know how long it was going to take. He didn't know how long it was going to take for this man to feel better, but he made a commitment to him. He made a commitment to him because he was called to love, because he knew what it was to be kind, to be generous, even when there was a cost attached to it. So there was a cost attached to it, to him financially and to his reputation. And sometimes it can feel like that when we are trying to be the best neighbour to the people that we meet. Sometimes we can see the needs that need to be met, and sometimes there's a cost to us personally. Sometimes it takes time, sometimes it takes money, sometimes it takes giving something that's maybe a little bit more tricky to give over, but we're called to love, and we're called to be generous, and we're told to be kind, and we're called to be the best neighbours that we can. And so it shouldn't matter whether it is that gang of kids that are at the front of your house that are being rowdy and that are making a noise all the time, or the neighbour down the street that is always blaring his music. We're still called to love. We're still called to show love and be gracious and be kind. So when I started thinking about this story, I started asking the question, well, how? How do I be the best neighbour? How do we be the best neighbour? And how do we bring young people with us on that journey? I don't have all of the answers to the hows. I think that is really challenging for all of us right now. Culture today is different from culture when we were that age, and so we don't necessarily always have the best perspective on it, in my opinion. But I did start asking myself the question, well, how can I do it? Like, in particular, how can I be the best neighbour, and how can I bring young people with me on that journey? How do we support and encourage our young people to adopt this everyday principle that Jesus is asking us to do into their everyday lives and into the culture within which they live right now? Who knows? I did have some thoughts, and I think that it might be quite helpful just to be honest with you about that. I have 4 points that I think maybe are good ideas to remember as we start having these conversations more and more. So my first point is be intentional. And that is about being intentional in your relationships with young people. And for some people that can seem like it's quite an intimidating statement. But it's really just about including them and acknowledging them and making sure that they know that you care about them. And maybe being the one that initiates conversation, that starts off the relationship. Those of us that have been around a bit longer, that are a little bit more experienced, that have tried this whole, being a bit more social, engaging in conversation. We've tried it a bit more, and we're a bit more confident with it, and we're a bit more confident at maybe not doing it well and messing up a little bit. But we're okay being a little bit more uncomfortable. I have learned over the last year or so that we have been on this growing young journey that young people really do want to be included in relationships with us, slightly more older, slightly more experienced people. And they maybe are not always the most confident being the ones that initiate conversations, but they do appreciate and value being included. So maybe just having a thought about thinking about the bigger picture when you're being intentional about relationships with young people. Look around the room. Look at the young people that you've got in the room to start with. And even just making sure that, on a weekly basis, when you see that young person, you make sure that you say hi and you give them a smile and they're able to feel welcome and they're able to feel acknowledged and noticed. And then the following week, it might mean more to them for you to actually go and say hi to them. So, good morning, how are you doing? It's nice to see you. And then a few weeks later, you do that and potentially you get a little bit of, oh, I'm fine, thanks. Fine, thanks. That's great. I'm doing well. And then the following week, it might be more, actually, I've had a really rough week. It's been really tough at uni this week. It's been really tough at school this week. I'm really struggling on this subject, and my teacher's not really helping me very much. But I'm doing okay. There's an opening right there for you to offer to pray for them, or just to say, can I include you in my prayers this week? I've been praying, for young people in our church, and I've been praying for you, and would you be okay if I continue to pray for you this week in this situation? And then the following week you see them and they say, oh, it has been a bit of a better week. It's a bit, still struggling a little bit, but I feel better about this week. And then you can say, well, actually, do you know what? Just give me a sec. Can I pray for you just now while we're standing here chatting? That would be great. Now, I know that's all a bit theoretical and it's a bit like maybe that would happen, maybe it wouldn't. But it's somewhere to start, isn't it? So maybe even just the starting point would just be just to look around the room the next time you're at a church meeting or a Sunday service or something that's happening where their young people are around, and just acknowledging them and noticing them and be intentional on your side in doing your part. And the bonus about being the person that starts to initiate those conversations is that inevitably you get to be the one that starts to develop a relationship with them. And then you can actually ask them, what are your needs? How can I help you? What can I do for you? How can I support you? How can I encourage you? And how can I inspire you? My second point is about being a good neighbour to them. A great way to teach our young people how to be a good neighbour is to be a good neighbour to them first. So sometimes it can be something just as little as seeing something that they need and doing your best to try and meet that need. Give them an encouraging word. Give them something like a drink of juice, during the main meeting or something that demonstrates what it is to be a good neighbour, to see the need of someone and to be actively interested in meeting that need. And we can see in that story of the Good Samaritan that he saw a need and he decided to meet a need. And that was an incredible demonstration to those that were around him at the time. They could see him, even though there was a cost attached to him and the actions that he took to make sure that this man was looked after and cared for. There was a great cost to him, but he did it anyway, and that was a demonstration of his love. I've got a quick story about something that we did a few years ago now. We were talking about kindness. We were talking about random acts of kindness. And this was before we'd actually had our youth meeting. We were just chatting about how we were going to run this session. And we decided that we were actually going to do something to demonstrate it. So me and my pal Kaylee decided that we were going to go down to Tesco and we were going to buy a whole bunch of like £1 Easter eggs, and one for each young person basically. And really late one evening we just decided to go on a bit of a secret mission, and we decided to drop an Easter egg off at each of the young person's door. So we did that and it was really good fun. It was really exciting. It made us feel a little bit good about ourselves, but that wasn't the primary objective, of course. But we wanted to do this because we wanted them to get a sense of what that felt like for someone to have done something kind for them. And then we were going to explore how it made them feel. So we got, a week or so later, we got to our meeting and we were running our program, and we were chatting about random acts of kindness, and we were chatting about blessing people and blessing each other. And then we had some conversations about, is there anything unusual that's happened over the last few weeks for you guys? And so a few of them did mention that they'd had a random Easter egg dropped off at their door. And so we did sort of ask them, like, how did that make you feel? Was there anyone here that really needed that at that point? Was it good timing for someone? And there was a few of them that spoke up and shared a little bit. But there was one girl that stopped me on the way out. And she just said, I just wanted to say thank you. She said, I got that Easter egg just before I was heading to bed. I'd had a really, really bad day at school. I've having some issues with some bullies, and they just had made my day really difficult. And I just needed to smile. And she said that when she opened that door to pull in her boots that had been left outside the front door, she saw that egg with her name on it, and she said she smiled so hard, and she just was so pleased and so delighted about getting that Easter egg. But what she'd said to me was, I really think I need someone to pray for me in this situation, because I feel like I've been trying to pray and I haven't been doing it right, because nothing's changing. And that led to some really great conversations about prayer and about how God felt about her, and an opportunity for me to pray for her. And she left our evening, youth meeting that night with such a different feeling. She was grateful, and she believed that Jesus was in this with her. My third point is the one point that I struggled with most, actually. You can tell that I'm a fairly vocal person, and I don't find it difficult to talk. And I do love to sit and have a chat, and I love chatting with young people. I find it very easy, and I find it very natural. I'm very comfortable with that. But my third point is being a good listener. And I have to say that, like I said, this one is the one I struggled with most. Very early in this Growing Young project, we were asked to form a listening group with some young people from the two churches. We were asked to find an opportunity to bring them together, which ended up being on Zoom due to the pandemic. And we had a number of questions that we were going to ask them. But the number one priority for us as adults that were in the actual conversations was that we just were basically told to shut up and listen and do our best not to steer the conversation, but let the young people speak amongst themselves. And the only time really we were invited to actually enter the conversation was just to ask them to expand their points or widen their points, so that we could really grasp what they were trying to tell us. And the other point is that we were asked to be very aware that we had to choose to not be offended. Because when you've been doing youth work for as long as some of us that are involved in these conversations are, some of these might be quite tough to hear points, because for some of them you'll have worked really hard on them, and you'll realise that actually they probably weren't the most important things for those young people at the time. So I certainly find that in those conversations, I had made a lot of assumptions, and I had a lot of opinions based on my upbringing and my background and my history. And when we talked to the young people, there were some things that I think that I had made assumptions about that actually I would have been better including them in on the conversations at the time, and it might have had a better outcome, and the conversations might have been more fruitful. But it was really interesting to hear that come from the young people, and they were very kind in the way that they said things, and they were very encouraging, and that was really nice. But it was really, really great to hear them feel like they had a platform where they could use their voice. So then we started asking them questions about what were the things that mattered to them, what were the things that young people of faith should be getting involved in and be using their platform for in today's culture, and there was issues of social justice, there was issues of environment, there was the issues of war, there was the issues of LGBTQI, there was issues of racial inequality and discrimination. There was issues of poverty, all these things that are coming up in today's conversations with young people. And our young people were passionate about some of these things, and we desperately felt like we need to be listening to them more, and being able to give them an opportunity to serve, and I guess cause a stir in a positive way with some of these things that they've been talking about, that really matter to them, that they really care about, that they really want to make a difference in some of these areas and take a stand for some of these things. I realized very early on in this journey that if the church is going to influence culture, and it is going to shift its perspective on how we input into our young people and how we get them to stay engaged in church and faith, that I had to be willing to jump on board with some of the stuff that mattered to them. I had to be willing to listen to them, listen to what was on their hearts, and be able to get on their page, really. And then finally, my last point, but probably most important point out of the 4 points that I've just laid out there, was be prayerful. And so it's about being mindful of our young people and be praying for them and acknowledging them in our prayers and bringing them to God and naming them specifically, and bringing their needs to God. When I was a young person, and I haven't said that very much in this time, but when I was a young person, we had a gentleman in our church who used to talk, and actually he still does, and he's still very much part of our church family, but he used to say to me every week, Leanne, I'm very proud of you. You're doing amazing things, and I am praying for you every day. I pray for you every day. And I was so blessed with that, and I'm still very blessed by that. He still says, I'm praying for you every day. That fills me with so much hope, so much encouragement. I am inspired by him, and it makes me want to pray for my young people every day also. So I know I've fired a whole pile of stuff at you there, and I really hope that you guys take something from it. I know that it presents a whole host of challenges, and it probably throws up a whole pile of questions that I certainly don't have all the answers for, but God does have the answers. And so we just have to keep praying that he will give us creative solutions, that we give us creative ideas. But that whole thing of, how do we encourage our young people to be the best neighbours? Well, I think all of these 4 points that I've mentioned there will get us to a point where they are enriched with the culture of being the best neighbour, and that it will keep our young people interested and inspired to do great things for our community, for our city, for our country, and for our nation. Thank you so much for listening to some of my wonderings, and for bearing with me as I try and figure out how to deliver this in a video setting, as opposed to, I'm much more comfortable being with people, so having to stand in front of a camera doing this is not as much fun by any means. But I am really glad that I've been able to share with you this morning, and that I've been able to maybe ask some questions and cause you to ask yourself some questions, to think about how you individually are able to work through some of this stuff. And I'm really looking forward to this next season of Growing Young. I think there's been a lot of revelation and a lot of creative solutions, and there will be more to come yet.
Thank you, Leanne. That's fantastic. What did you make of it?